Welcome, Jack Complex, open daily, herbal and traditional pharmacy. Alternative medicine products for all various ailments. Visit our vegetarian cafeteria, affordable meals made to order. Burgers, hot dogs, soups, sandwiches, etc. Location 25 Dajrak Street, Triumph East Coast Demerara, behind the Regional 4 RDC. Telephone 626-5877 or 220-4386. Remember, you are what you eat.
They making new laws every day, and those of the master they throw away. The things they go about and preach, it's not what they teach, and no one seems to care. The whole world lives in fear, just despair everywhere.
Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna kullu Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. In the name of the Creator, most merciful and most gracious, we give praise and thanks to God as I greet you, my brothers and sisters, with the greetings of peace. To my Christian brothers and sisters, peace be unto you. To my Hindu brothers and sisters, namaste. To my Rastafarian brothers and sisters, Jah peace and Jah love. And to my Muslim brothers and sisters and all other denominations, I greet you with the greetings of peace in the Arabic language. Assalamu alaikum. Brothers and sisters, you know, when we are born into different beliefs. That's why I greet you in the name of all our religions that we have, because depending upon which religion we are born into, that is what dictates and regulates our parents, our families, and we ourselves. But it has reached a stage whereby when we reach a certain type of consciousness, that we question some of the things that we are taught to believe. And sometimes when we question these things, we get answers that are not in accordance with what we were taught. You see, brothers and sisters, it happens to be that we believe in a certain way and we have a certain amount of space in what we believe and what we were taught to believe. And when we go outside of that space, some of us don't want to know because we were not taught that. And some of us are afraid to move away from what we were taught. I mentioned last week that I was taught, growing up, I was taught a lot about Christianity. And I grew up under the teachings of that particular religion. And as I grew older, and I realized that there are certain things that I was taught that doesn't agree with what I am inspired to understand. Which means there are things that as I grow I understand, the experiences that I have that make me understand other things other than what I was taught to believe. And the people have a way of believing in that circle that they were taught to believe. And when they hear anything that is outside of that circle, then they criticize, ostracize, and even go so far as to call you unbeliever. That's what people do. When you don't believe like they believe, then you're an unbeliever. Well, brothers and sisters, you know, it is a relationship that we have personally with God. Each and every one of us have got a relationship to our Creator. And each one of us is different to the other one. So you will find that these differences make a lot of problems, because even those who teach us what we should believe, when we are growing and when we gain a certain amount of consciousness, we realize, not criticize, we realize that some of the things are not in keeping with the value of truth. And if, as an individual, we start being conscious of certain other things than we were taught, then we have no other choice but to follow that pathway that leads us into truth. For example, our teachings in Christianity has made me understand and research and look for where did these teachings come from, and question the type of teachings that I am supposed to believe in and I was taught to believe in. Now, as far as Christianity is concerned, when we read the Bible, we find in the Old Testament, we find no mention of Christianity. And like I said before, that we are, and I'm speaking now about the people of African descent, because this particular month and year that's coming up is the year of the people of African descent. And so I tend to speak to the people of African descent even more than I would emphasize my sermon on the concept and the philosophy of others. I can't speak for other people's religion. But then I can admire some of the teachings of other religions which can coincide with the inspirations that I receive from Almighty God when I communicate or when I pray. And when these things are mentioned and they don't fit with what I have been taught to believe, then I am criticized. But criticism is a good thing. Some of us don't like to be criticized. But the reason why criticism is positive is that you are able to compare what you have been taught and what people feel that you should think. Brothers and sisters, the people of African descent are coming from an environment that was made and orchestrated in a manner that is different from the culture that they belong to. You know, in this country, we celebrate at times the arrival day for the Indians. You have an Indian arrival day. But there is no arrival day for the Africans because they never arrived as how the Indians arrived, or even how the Chinese might have arrived. The people of African descent, or the Africans, were brought here. They didn't arrive here. And in order for them to be transported in a manner that was legitimate for the slave masters, because that's how we came. We were brought as slaves. We didn't arrive, we were brought as slaves. And our slave masters made it a point of duty before taking our ancestors from Africa. They made it a point of duty to teach them what they should believe. The question is always, didn't the Africans, our ancestors, didn't they have a belief system before the slave masters taught them what to believe? Didn't our foreparents have some kind of belief? But when the slave master went to Africa, he realized that he couldn't understand the belief of those people. He couldn't understand the practice of worship of those people. He couldn't understand the music of those people. He couldn't understand the nourishment of those people. He couldn't understand how those people trained their children and how those people lived as families. But what he felt, like those who call themselves scholars, he felt that the belief system that he took to Africa was the right thing, and that is what they should believe. He condemned the belief of the Africans as being something that was sinful, because that's what he told them. So he came with his Christianity, he came with his system of Christianity and family life, and he made them in his own way to understand that what they were practicing was not good, and that they should move away from that and accept the religion that he brought, which he used as a means to indoctrinate and to capture in order for him to transport the slaves from their place of solemn worship and understanding. Our brothers and sisters, our ancestors, never believed in anyone who came to save them. For they knew nothing about sin. They knew nothing about being saved from sin. This is what was told to them by the slave master. And so he indoctrinated them to believe that what they were practicing, their type of worship, that it was something that was not good, that was sinful, and that the only way they could live a proper life, even though he went there and saw them living the life that they were taught by their ancestors, he indoctrinated them by taking false gifts and making false promises so that they could be indoctrinated enough to trust him. Today, brothers and sisters, our people, the people of African descent, are in a state of total confusion. Confusion because they have been made to believe that they are sinners. The fact that you go into a country and you oppress the people, you ill-treat the people, and you take the people's religion away from them. You take the people's way of life away from them. It's one of the greatest sins that have been practiced and consecrated on the people of African descent. You know, in this country we have Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam as the three main ways of worshiping God. And that causes a lot of problems. And why I speak a lot about the Christianity is because I told you I was born, parents taught me that I had to go to Sunday school. I had to believe that there was a Son of God that died to save me and all people like me, and that it was a sin if I should reject that kind of teaching. Brothers and sisters, today we still wonder where God is. We still wonder who God is. And we still wonder what we should do in order to be close to our Creator. I don't want my Christian brothers and sisters to believe that I am against their belief, but I have a problem, and there are many brothers and sisters like myself who have got a similar problem of believing that Jesus is the Son of God and that He came to save us. The slave master made it very indelible to portray Jesus not looking like us, but looking like Him. And that's one of the first things that I questioned in my zest to understand, because it is important that we understand what we believe, and it's important that we understand who we believe, and it's important that we understand why we believe. And so there was a certain time where I figured to myself that if Jesus is the Son of God and I am a male, then I am also a son of my Creator. The way we were taught to believe is that this Jesus, this white Jesus, is the only Son that God has. Where is this God, and how does this God look like? And so by portraying the Son of God as being equal in terms of ethnicity, as being white, then naturally, if you're black, you can't be the Son of God. That is the teaching. if you portray Jesus as being white, and you bring that white man to me to tell me this is the Son of God, this is the Son of God that died to save us, then if that Son is white, then I am forced to believe, according to the teachings of the slave master, that I can never identify myself with being the Son of God because I am black. That led me to questioning other things. Because on the other side, we are told that this God that we believe in, or that we are taught to believe in, is a God that has no color, has no ethnicity, and we are even told in Islam and in Christianity that God is a spirit. So as I grew up and I kept growing, I wonder how a spirit looks like. If God is a spirit, what does this spirit look like? Because I have no idea of what a spirit or what color or what ethnicity has this spirit. But I'm told to believe in this spirit, this God that is a spirit, and that I must believe in his Son. The Son is portrayed as being white. That means that the spirit that I'm supposed to believe in is also supposed to be like the Son. Then they also said that Jesus said, when you see me, you see the Father. So what are they trying to tell me? That Jesus, who is white and who is portrayed as being white, if I see him, I see the Father. So isn't the Father supposed to be looking like the Son? When we research and we try to understand more, those among us who refuse to accept that fallacy, who refuse to accept that fable, who refuse to accept that myth, when we research further, we realize that if there is a Son, then it has to be the S-U-N. And you cannot crucify the S-U-N. There is no way that you can crucify the S-U-N. And it's another thing that struck me is that the display, the portrayal of Jesus, when you see them portray Jesus as being white, you always see the Son at the back of Jesus, which also inspired me to understand that that brightness that they show with Jesus, that is the Son. And they also taught us to believe that this Son of God does miracles. Once we believe and we have faith, those miracles will happen to us in our lives. When I moved from studying Christianity and decided to try understanding what Islam is, then I was confronted with the same kind of behavior. I realized that in the Quran, the whole part of the Quran, very large part of the Quran, deals with the Old Testament of the Bible. All the prophets of Islam, most of them are in the Bible. And I went on further to try and find out then who Jesus was, because it was difficult for me to accept a white Jesus that died to save me. A white Jesus portrayed as a person coming from the people who took my ancestors out of Africa, who chained my ancestors with chains, who raped my mothers and my sisters, who packed them into ships and transported them over the Atlantic into the countries that we find ourselves in as black people. When I followed through my inspiration of wanting to learn and wanting to understand, because that happens in school, don't it? Your teacher tells you something and it becomes a bit difficult to understand. Then you have to research it. You have to try and understand what is the teacher really telling us. Because, you know, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Twisty and Twirly were two screws. Little Jack Horner sat in the corn. These are things. There was an old lady who lived in a shoe. She had so many children, she didn't know what to do. So she gave them some tea without any bread, and she whipped them all slowly and sent them to bed. I was taught those things, and I was taught to learn those things. And I was taught to memorize those things, taught to me by the same persons who enslaved my ancestors, who brought me, my ancestors, here in chains and in terrible conditions. Brothers and sisters, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And when you want people to believe a myth so that you can control them, so that you can have them in subjection, then you will tell them anything that you feel is necessary for you to keep that control over them. And that's what our slave masters did to us. When I got into Islam, I started to research as well. And then I found out that there also was a slave trade by the Arabs. I also found out that my ancestors, the black ancestors from Africa, were transported through the Sahara Desert And millions of them died, transported by the Arabs who brought Islam and tried to have the black people of North Africa be subjected to their teachings of Islam. So the way the slave master, the white slave master taught us, and the way that the white slave master subjected us to his teaching, that's the same way the Arabs taught us and subjected us to their teachings. I understood also that Muhammad, and that was the difference between Christianity and Islam. The revolution of Muhammad against the subjection of slavery was because Muhammad did not accept those types of teachings. The same way we have the story of Abraham, whereby the Christians are saying that the sacrifice that Abraham was supposed to have made is not, it's by sacrificing Isaac, and the Muslims are saying that it was not Isaac, it was Ishmael. So there again, the teachings of the Quran came from the Arabs, and when the Arabs subjected the black Africans into accepting Islam as the savior, they spoke about this Muhammad that is supposed to be the one that fought against the hierarchy of the Arabs. And then they tried to portray Muhammad as being one of them, just like how the white slave master portrayed Jesus as being one of them. So in reality, and in this month of people of African descent, it's important to see how the people of African descent have been brought up in between two sets of people who enslaved them and who had their own philosophy of what they taught. Now, how do you think the white people were able to infiltrate the Africans as easily as they had? Because the Arabs helped them. The black African ancestors were sold to the white slave master by the Arabs. The same Arabs who came with their so-called Islam and who portrayed their Muhammad, because the Muhammad that we know as a people, that Muhammad, his mother is a black woman. That's the difference between us looking at Muhammad and looking at Jesus. Jesus' mother is portrayed as a white woman. And what made it even worse is that at least the Christians showed us how Jesus looked. The Arabs never showed us how Muhammad looked. But what we know is that in that particular religion, Islam, that it is mixed and meddled with black Africans. They tell us about Bilal in Islam. They tell us about the loyalty of Bilal, and they tell us how Bilal looked. They are very heavy in letting us know that Bilal was black. They don't deny that. The Christians have not depicted any of Jesus' disciples or Jesus' followers as being black. At least Islam did that. But then with my research, I realized that Muhammad was not prepared to be subjected to the slavery that was put upon them by the Arabs. So he fought against it. There are many things, brothers and sisters, that I don't have the time to explain to you about. But what has happened over the years and over the centuries, in our country, for example, was 300 years of slavery. And in these 300 years, we were having the white slave master and the Amerindians. The Amerindians were never slaves, but the Amerindians were employed by the white slave master to keep the slaves under control. Today, we wonder, brothers and sisters, why in a country like this, all other ethnic groups are taken care of, are looked after, except the people of African descent. The people of African descent are the people in this country who spend. They are consumers. We spend. All the money that's spent in this country, most of the money, are the people of African descent. Most of the money spent in America, in the USA, are the people of African descent. We have never been taught by the slave master to build ourselves and to work ourselves into a position of independence. Never. In no country where black people are living are they supported in any manner or in any way of bringing themselves into a state where they can be independent enough to look after themselves and their offspring. And so we must know, especially in this year of people of African descent, we must know that the God that we believe in, if that God has a color, because they say We are the image and likeness of God. That's what we were taught to believe. Well, if I am black and I am the image and likeness of God, then God is black. Our brothers and sisters still have got a long way to go and still have got a long way to understand what has been done to them. And we have those brothers and sisters who are aware of what I'm saying, and they keep trying their best, writing books, doing movies, doing documentaries, so that we can have an idea of what we are supposed to teach our children. For we cannot, as a people of African descent, allow our children to grow up in the ignorance that we have grown up in. And that's the problem that we are having all over the face of this earth. Brothers and sisters, that is why when I say we have two sets of black people, we have those African blacks who are African blacks, who refuse to believe the myths, who refuse to believe that Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, who refuse to believe that a white Jesus died to save them, who understands that the only way we are able to develop ourselves and our children and the future and make a future for our children is to be independent and to be economically strong. And then there are those Africans who are Negroes. That's what we were told. We were told by the slave master that we are Negroes. That word have never existed in Africa, Negroes. It's not a word that our African foreparents knew about. They never knew about that. Our foreparents also never knew about being born in sin. Our foreparents never knew about heaven and hell. These are things that continue to keep us under control and to subject us to a teaching that is a myth and that we are expected to hand down to our children for future generations. Brothers and sisters, it has been planned, it has been executed, and we stay as a people in between Christianity and Islam. That's the two religions, the religion of the Arab and the religion of the slave master, that continues to control our destinies. But like I said, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all of the time.
Welcome, Back Jack Complex, open daily, herbal and traditional pharmacy. Alternative medicine products for all various ailments. Visit our vegetarian cafeteria, affordable meals made to order. Burgers, hot dogs, soup, sandwiches, etc. Location, 25 Dajrak Street, Triumph East Coast Demerara, behind the Regional 4 RDC. Telephone 626-5877 or 220-4386. Remember, you are what you eat.
Man create his own monster. Weapons of damnation and disaster. No sign at all of human rights. Today has turned into night. Is racialism so? And segregation so? Which way is left to go? I don't know. Hold on. Tell me, what about love thy neighbor? Tell me, what about he ain't heavy?
Welcome, Jack Complex, open daily, herbal and traditional pharmacy. Alternative medicine products for all various ailments. Visit our vegetarian cafeteria, affordable meals made to order. Burgers, hot dogs, soup, sandwiches, etc. Location 25 Dazrak Street, Triumph East Coast Demerara, behind the Regional 4 RDC. Telephone 626-5877 or 220-4386. Remember, you are what you eat.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. You know, we have in this country a racial problem, as black people have all over the world, racial problems. And we don't have the time to go through why this is so. But when the slave master, the white slave master, went to Africa, he saw kings, he saw queens. He had a king. They had kings. But they were surprised to find that Africa also had kings and queens. Our problem has been brought about by political devils. The Indians did not arrive in this country until about 200 years after the Africans were here or were enslaved here. The enslavement was between, like I said, the white slave master and the Amerindians. There was no problem with the Indians. We didn't have a problem with racial discrimination against Indian people and African people. That problem wasn't around. That problem was constructed by politicians for their own devious means, their own nastiness. And since the Indians have got things that are similar to them, you know, the long hair, the straight nose, the thin lips, you know, they were preferred by the white man. And since they were indentured workers, they came here, they arrived here. And since the Africans were brought here, the Indians were made to believe, like the Amerindians as well, that they are a better ethnic group than the Africans. And that has remained that way until now, until today. And it is a very sad situation, because those people among the Africans who dared to reject the myth and the gods that they were taught to believe in, they were assassinated, they were executed. I know you heard about Damon, you heard about Kofi, you heard about Apatia. All of them were killed because they were black Africans who refused to be indoctrinated and who refused to accept the myth of worshiping a God that has nothing to do with their culture and nothing to do with their ethnicity. Today, when we look back, go all the way back, for example, we look at the birth of Jesus, that was explained to us, that was taught to us, that we were taught to believe in. And we remember, I just take a little part out of it, with the story of Herod the king, when Herod sent his soldiers throughout the country to kill the firstborn and kill all the boys, because this boy was born to lead his people. And they were looking for Jesus. And an angel of the Lord appeared unto Herod, unto Joseph, his father, in the middle of the night, and told him, "Arise, take the child, and flee to Egypt." Egypt, in those days, were only black people. Moses was put on the river Nile. His mother had to get rid of him, and she put him on the river Nile. And he was found by Pharaoh's daughter, and he was brought up in Pharaoh's palace. He couldn't be anything but the people that were in Egypt. And the people in Egypt those times were predominantly black people. Even in the Bible, when we read the story of of Joseph taking the child to Egypt, when we read that story, we are not told that Egypt was a part of Africa. It was always told, you read it in the Bible and you will see that it was told as if Egypt was a place away from Africa. So you find, that when they went there, they saw the pyramids. The pyramids, and up to today, they are still not able to tell us how the pyramids in Africa were built, which were built by the Africans. Precise. Everything was constructed precisely. The blocks and everything that were used to build the pyramid. They don't even know up to now how those blocks were brought about and how those pyramids were built. Read it and you will see. But during the centuries and so on, we have had Africans who preferred to remain as Negroes. And there are those of us who reject even the terminology Negro, because it's identical and it identifies. A Negro is a person who is identified as a slave. And we see it every day. In closing, I don't like to mix myself too much in the situation that we face politically, but I don't separate God from politics. I don't separate God from any one of the leaders of the world, just as I don't separate Almighty God from the leaders of this country. But what is sad is that I listened to the news a few days ago, and we are preparing for an election process. We are now preparing to get into an election soon. And you know we have a lot of parties. Black people are very good in forming parties, as well as our Indian brothers and sisters. The only difference is that the parties that are being formed among the black people are parties who have got African blacks and African Negroes. The Negro is always ready to compromise. The Negro is still not aware of the fact that he is a Negro because he is ready at all times to compromise himself or herself against those brothers and sisters who realize that it is important to identify themselves as black people. And I heard in the news an accusation that is being brought against the leader of one of the political parties in this country. And the only thing I have to say is a shame, shame, shame when I hear that that leader is being accused by some Negro. It has to be a Negro, because if you are preparing to fight an election, because an election is a war, you know that. Anytime you hear about opposition and election, you are going into a war. And when I hear that on one side, where the Africans are mostly, predominantly, that there is a plan that is being executed to weaken the one side by accusing the leader of one side of sexual harassment. I was wondering to myself, who instigated it? How did that come about? You're preparing for a war and you are being infiltrated to have problems among yourselves. And it's being brought to the forefront. Why? And when we look, if we would investigate that accusation in its entirety, we will find that it's the Negroes who have been bought and sold in order for such an accusation to come about. That the leader of one side is being accused of sexual harassment. I was looking at the person who is supposed to be accusing the brother of sexual harassment, and I wonder what it is about that person that one would want to sexually harass. Anyway, brothers and sisters, when I look at the other side, I know that in every party, every political party, there are problems. But you know, to bring your problems and divide yourselves in a time when you are preparing to fight a battle for the benefit and the future of the children, I wondered to myself, why is it a continuous exercise to have Negroes who are prepared to sell out, sell themselves. I haven't heard from the opposition party, the other party. They have their problems, and they had their Congress, and I haven't heard any accusations. They are, because of their cultural identities, no one is able to influence them into accusing one another of sexual harassment or whatever else, because they cannot be infiltrated by forces who are not like them. Brothers and sisters, it is important for you African brothers and sisters to understand that we are, as an African people, the way we are because we are divided into African blacks and Negroes. And I would want to ask the Negroes to look at themselves properly. Because once you accept that you're a Negro, you will always be one. And like I said, a Negro is identified with being a slave. And so once you accept you're a Negro, you know. I heard a few weeks ago that there was a decision in Parliament made, and I think it was a very positive decision, to not use the word Negro anymore, not use the word Dougla anymore, and not use the word Bofiana anymore. I think it's a little progress. It's as little as that, but it is some kind of progress. Because I always wonder why these words exist and why people are identified in such a manner that is culturally not acceptable to the ethnic groups that they belong to. I want to thank you, brothers and sisters, for listening to me, and you have my number. Those of you who would like to contact me. And again, here is our brother Noah Yashuran that brought out this booklet. You know, the ancestors of the amalgamated Africans of Guyana. And I think it is important for every African home to have this booklet, so you will get an idea and understand what has happened to the black people in this country and the origin and how it went about. It's a very small booklet, and you can redeem that booklet from us. Just call and come, and we have the booklets here, so that you will have it to show to your children. As soon as they are in a position that they can read, let them read this booklet, and let the people of African descent understand their culture, understand their roots, and understand that it is quicker to get rid of the Negro and understand the black African. Thank you very much, brothers and sisters, as I wish my brothers and sisters who are of African descent a knowledgeable and understanding year of the people of African descent. It has nothing to do with racism, it has to do with truth. Those of us who are seeking the truth, who have found the truth among the people of African descent, we need to make the Negroes know the truth. For it's only the truth that will set you free. For the truth is the truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Assalamu alaikum.
Brothers and sisters, practical experience is the greatest teacher. Memory is the greatest truth. And ingratitude, ungratefulness, is the greatest sin. Remember that.
Breaking down is a whole big runaround. A lot of talk is what goes on, while the world is left to mourn. Starvation taking toll, weapons out of control. The atmosphere is cold, so cold. Oh Lord, tell me, what about love thy neighbor? Tell me, what about he ain't heavy, he's my brother. Nobody cares a damn anymore. All they got on their mind is war. Tell me, what about equal rights and justice? Tell me, what about peace and happiness? Hey. They making new laws every day, and those of the master they throw away.
Welcome, Jack Complex, open daily, herbal and traditional pharmacy. Alternative medicine products for all various ailments. Visit our vegetarian cafeteria, affordable meals made to order. Burgers, hot dogs, soup, sandwiches, etc. Location, 25 Dajrak Street, Triumph East Coast Demerara, behind the Regional 4 RDC. Telephone 626-5877 or 220-4386. Remember, you are what you eat.